Alright, what's up everybody? This is Dr. Corey Glenn. I've been promising I would do a video on using these Taub stains, and so got a case I need to do it on, so I thought I'd turn the cameras on. But let me just say up front, I have no interest in Taub. I paid full price for the products. I just really like them. You know, I've spent a lot of time applying gingival composites and things like that to printed restorations. You know, I make these surgical guides for immediate load, so I'm always making these 3D printed hybrid dentures, and the pinking of them is just a huge pain in the butt. And so this has just saved me a lot of time. It's super easy to use. You know, it's just go on Taub's website, check it out. I think you got to order by phone, but anyway, they've got some great products I've really begun to like. Primarily the ones that I'm using are the minute stains. So I'm doing that for the tooth shading. So that's going to be your browns, your incisal translucency, your decalcification spots, things like that. I'm using their Elixirs for the pink, okay? And then they make a great glaze, varnish, whatever you want to call it. There's two I've primarily used. For the longest I've been using this nano varnish, which is actually a product from Dreve. But I recently got the Stellar Glaze LC, which I really liked that as well. We'll see as time goes on which one I end up liking most. And then this also is a really cool product that I tried out. If you're doing pickups, this is a great product for you know, picking up your temporary cylinders or picking up locators or whatever you need to do. This is dual cure. It bonds equally well to resin or to acrylic. So anyway, get you some of that, great stuff. There's tooth color. I think they said they've got a pink color as well. But anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and get out the stuff that I will actually use. So I don't use every product in the kit. I'm going to use their blue. I use the white, if I can find it. I use the cervical blend. We'll set that aside. That's some clear that you can use for diluting, and then the white, okay? So as far as the minute stains are concerned, these are the 4 that I use right here. Then they also have, again, the clear liquid. They have a thinner, so if you need to thin this down, if you get it a little splotchy somewhere and need to thin it out, you can do that. Cleaning your brushes, you can use the thinners. And then on the Elixirs, I generally will just use you know, one color throughout, with the exception if I'm trying to get really nice looking gingiva, maybe I'll do a darker stain on the mucosa. But you know, you can play around with these. This is more of a almost purple. It's for more of the Mahari, dark pigmented type gingiva. And then they just kind of go in order. The LT is, you know, the lightest one, so I'll use that. So just for demoing today, I think I'll use the light on right around the tooth, kind of where the attached gingiva would be, and then we'll go a little darker down in the mucosal area. And let me set aside a few things here. But before we jump straight into that, I wanted to point out something that I think is important. Now, when I was trained on like the Mio stains for staining zirconia, one of the things they really stress to us about trying to make that look more lifelike and to really pop on you is to cut in some anatomy. So this is purely a printed restoration, as you see right now. There's, you know, the gingiva has been festooned, but it's all monochromatic, not very lifelike looking. And one of the things that will add a lot of life to this is if you'll cut in some mamelons, some pericomata, the little horizontal lines in there. It does a couple of things. One, it adds depth, and it gives somewhere for your stains to kind of accumulate and to really create that depth illusion on these, because again, it's monochromatic. So I guess that's 2 things. Get some depth, and it just creates more character in the restoration. So let me grab a pencil. Okay, I'm going to grab a pencil. So I wanted to outline for you where I usually will do this. So for my anterior teeth, I'm usually going to cut in a couple of depressions, and those are going to look something like this. That is, if you think about like the developmental lobes on a tooth, how they all merge together. This would be where if you had a really virgin tooth, you would see the three humps right there, the mamelons. Okay, so this would be the remnants of those that you would see on a nice tooth. And usually on the canine, I'll do something like that. So you don't have to mark these, but for demonstration purposes, I just wanted to make it more visible where I'm creating these depressions at. All right, posteriors, who's going to see it? You're just showing out at that point. But I've got a finishing burr. Okay, this is just a high-speed handpiece, red, kind of coarse finishing burr. And what I'm going to do is just create some little depressions here. I'm not trying to get real deep with it. Make sure you remove all your pencil marks. So I'll time lapse this, you get the idea. All right, so I've just created some shallow depressions here. That's going to create some depth to it. Give it the old shirt wipe. All right, remove your dust. And then I'm also going to create some pericomata. Okay, so with this, I'm going to use the tip. Really, really light touch, and I'm just kind of scratching in horizontal lines, you know, maybe 8 or 10 of them, right? And there's no real precision to this. I'm just kind of lightly going across. And I don't know if this is right or not, I tend to do this primarily in the middle. I'm not trying to get interproximal with this stuff. I'm just going to put little bitty score marks. You don't really want your patient to be feeling these and it feel like a scratchy tooth. All right, I gotta turn my compressor back on. Let me recharge that for a second. Okay. So we were just kind of putting in our horizontal lines. You could do this in the posterior if you wanted to. It's really quick to do. Now, a lot of you may not have a high-speed handpiece in your lab area. I would highly, highly suggest that you do that. I think I've got an old YouTube video on my channel of setting one of these up. You can get a very small, if you're trying to keep it simple and not worry about plumbing it into your lab or anything, you can buy just a really cheap, quiet compressor that would sit underneath the lab desk, and just get a cheap eBay air-driven handpiece. And I find I'm so much more efficient using a high-speed handpiece than I am a slow-speed, like most lab technicians. Maybe it's just our level of comfort of what we've dealt with the most, but I would definitely recommend you do that. So if you notice here, might be tough to see, but we've got a little character in the teeth now, okay? Now I'll pause periodically here because I'm going to take still photos too to hopefully let you appreciate it a little better. All right, so we've got that done. And this is usually the order I go in. This is not to say it's the only way, but it's what I do. I'm going to apply the gingiva first, because the reason for that is I find that even when I try to be super careful, I'm somewhere going to go ahead and get red on these teeth or pink. And, you know, obviously that's not going to look real natural. So what I like to do is just apply this quickly, because this is what you're doing the biggest volume of. I'm going to apply it quickly, and then I don't care if I get a little on there. If I do, I'll come back after the fact, and using that same finishing burr, I will just crisp up that margin and just lightly abrade that off of the teeth so that I've got a good clean transition from gingiva to tooth. And that's been the most efficient for me. All right, so with these Taub Elixirs and with the minute stains, you're gonna find that you really wanna shake them up. More so on the minute stains, the pigments will settle in the bottom. Now here, I don't think it's so much a pigment as much as it is in the minute stains. So I can usually just shake these, and that seems to be adequate. And you could apply with the little fingernail paint brush that's inside of that, but I usually like to be a little more precise and use a paintbrush. All right, so we're going to go ahead and paint this on everywhere where the gingiva is. All right, now my favorite thing, and the reason I'm advocating these, I got nothing to gain for it, is because I don't have to light cure this. So I used GC Optiglaze for the longest time. I could get a decent result, but it required 3 coats I usually found, and I would have to light cure it between every single layer, and I had to be strategic where I'm holding it and all this. I don't want to mess with that. With these things, you paint it on, and in 10 seconds, it's dry. It's got a really volatile carrier. I don't know if it's ethanol or what it is, but it dries really quick. So in 10 seconds, it's set. You don't have to do anything, and now you're ready to put on more layers. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to just dip this in. I could stir around, agitate the bottom, but I do try to fully wet my brush. And I find that a little goes a long way, so I'll really spread that out quickly. And I'm not getting right up on the tooth yet. Again, if you think about how does a natural gingiva look, it's going to be darker down here in the mucosal area and lighter right up around the tooth in what would be your attached gingiva. And so by virtue of not getting right on the teeth yet, I'll get that in a subsequent layer. That's going to come out a little bit lighter, even if you're only using one shade for this. All right. Now I'm intentionally glopping this up a little bit right here because I wanted to show you something here in a moment. All right, there's coat 1. All right, now I got a little gloppy here. That's not a huge problem. If I do that, I keep the thinner handy, and I'll just, clean my brush off, and I'll come in with the thinner and just kind of, de-splotch that. All right, you can see that's breaking down some of the clumpier areas, thinning it back out. So sometimes it's like it dries too quick in a given area, and now you've got too much, but that's okay. All right, so just know that's the case. Now we're ready to maybe go with the second coat. So maybe at this point, I'll go ahead and start doing my, my actual gingiva. Again, this is where it's nice to not have to be overly concerned with getting it on the teeth. Like you can see, I'm getting it on the teeth here a little bit, and I'm not worried about it. That's going to be okay because I'm coming back and abrading that off later in the process. So I do try to just dip the tip of my brush when I'm doing this stage because you can see when I had too much right there, I kind of really glopped it up. So just a little bit on the tip of your brush is all you need here. And you can rub it on the side of the glass container there to remove that excess. Now, just as I'm doing this, I'll kind of just tell you some other thoughts. The downside to staining as opposed to a legit gingival composite, right, is that in time it can wear off. I'll go ahead and do the lingual. So, if I was wanting this to be, let's say, an affordable permanent restoration, for a patient that maybe they can't afford the zirconia hybrid, but you still want to have an option for them, which I'm going to do a whole different video and go on a rant about that because I think that's important. But if you're trying to do that, then you know, you don't want to have them in every 6 months and restain this thing. So another cool technique I found that still allows you to go much faster and not have the expense of, you know, using all gingival composites is to go ahead and stain and then annex gum. You know, they obviously make gingival composites, but the one I really like to use for this is they're flowable in the translucent pink. Okay, so it's very translucent looking. And the nice thing with that is after I've done a nice stain job, I can actually just come back over the top with a very thin layer of that translucent pink flowable gingiva. And that actually has some thickness to it, right? So it can't wear off easily. So that creates, I don't know, maybe a couple tenths of a millimeter of thickness of body over the top of your staining that is not going to wear away. And that's a great option for making this, you know, last for the long haul. So I'm a little gloppy in some areas here. I'm going to thin this. Okay. So no one's looking at the lingual of your restoration, so I wouldn't go overboard trying to do this. But man, I love the fact that I can just handle this 10 seconds after I've applied to an area, because it's on there. It's not going anywhere. It's stuck on, and you should be good to go. Okay. So I've gotten into the interproximal areas with everything. And usually up here on this kind of attached gingiva area, I'll typically only do one coat, because again, I think you'll find it helpful when you're first doing this just to pull up a picture of a retracted smile where you can see the gingiva well, and just try to mimic that, you know, try to make it look natural. And if you would notice, you would see the attached gingiva is going to be lighter, right? That's a more fibrous tissue. You're not going to make out all the blood vessels and things in it. And so I'll try to do that. So I've kind of touched that up. I'm done on that attached gingiva band right around the neck of the teeth. Now maybe touch this one spot up here. All right, that's all I'm doing there. Now the rest of this, I'll do another coat over the top of this, not trying to really get down deep into the interproximal or into that gingival attached tissue. I'm just, again, a relatively thick layer and just applying that through here. And a little bit of splotchiness, honestly, is not a bad thing, because, you know, gingiva doesn't look absolutely consistent in nature either. It kind of has darker areas and lighter areas. So just, you know, just play with this and get it to however you like. All right. Now, for a printed temp restoration, I'd probably just quit at that and now clean the teeth up. But just to show a difference here, let's do the other darker. So this is the number 4, and let's just apply some of that down in the gingival, you know, mucosal areas. So you can see, just based on what's left in the jar, I use this one a lot. All right, it's got a little bit more darkness to it. So if you wanted to maybe do fewer coats, maybe you just start with this. All right, and just for showing off, let's get the dark and maybe do kind of mimic some mucosa in this. So little goes a long way. You see how now that's creating more of that purplish hue like you would have in mucosal tissue. Now granted, it's at the bottom of your restoration down here where no one other than another dentist is going to be seeing it, but so be it. Like, I want to make it look halfway decent. And again, if I'm doing OptiGlaze for this thing, I've probably only gotten one coat on by this point, and I know I'm gonna have to do multiple more. So this to me is just a big time saver. All right, so let's stop with that. Maybe I'll do a tiny bit more on the lingual tissue with this number 4. Okay, good enough. So I'm done with that, and now I'm ready to clean up around the gingival margin and remove any excess stain that I've got on places. I always try to put the lids on these when they're not in use because, again, the liquid component is pretty volatile and it will end up evaporating out and, you know, wasting material. So now I'm coming in and light touch. I'm not looking to change the shape of this or cut in more anatomy or anything like that. I'm just trying to remove the excess that I got on the teeth themselves. All right, hopefully you can see these 4 teeth here where I've cleaned it up a little bit on the lingual. That's what I'm after. So I'm going to proceed around. Again, notice right here where it's gotten on the teeth, just abrading that off with the tip. And this is where I want to use a real fine finishing burr because I'm not trying to gouge this thing up and make it rough to the touch or anything like that. I've done all of the anatomy I want to do already with this same burr. There we go. I will time lapse this again just for one more demo. You see right there. And if you had to get into this very much, you might end up, you know, refining your pericomata and stuff again. Or you could even do that step after you've applied the gingiva. A lot of ways to skin this cat, but I'm going to time lapse this for the sake of not making this an hour video. Okay, so I've removed all of the excess from the teeth. One of the things I suggest keeping around, let's see a spot I missed, dadgummit. There we go. Getting too picky. Keep a toothbrush or some kind of brush around just because the little dust that you're generating as you do this, you don't want to incorporate back in and kind of get it stuck in there with a rough surface. So that's this is after the gingiva has been applied, right? Looks pretty good right off the bat. And we could stop here. Again, if this was a short-term temp, then, you know, is there much need to do much beyond this? I don't think so. But, you know, I'm going to go ahead and stain the teeth too, which will really make it pop. All right, kind of a bummer being as OCD and anal as I am and being a dentist because I can pick something to death, but I'm quitting. All right, so now we're ready for staining teeth. Optional, you don't have to do it, but I like to. So with this stuff, the minute stains, I do find that the pigments tend to settle down in there, and that's, you know, not what I want. So I will generally go in with a brush and agitate all of that off the bottom, get it resuspended, and then I'll close it back up and shake this around. So here's another nice thing about this cervical blend. As we all know, these 3D printed resins for permanent crown and bridge are relatively expensive. You know, they can range from $600 to $1,200 a liter. And so I don't find most people are willing to stock a resin that expensive in 6 shades. It just doesn't make sense. So instead, what I do and what I suggest to people is just stock a lighter shade, maybe like a bleach shade for people who want really white, and then maybe an A1. And if you need to match a dentition that's darker than that, you can use this in various dilutions to stain down to that shade, okay? Now here, I don't want to give the patient dark looking teeth, so what I'm going to do instead is I'll just dilute this a little bit. So I'm going to get a bit of this clear, okay, not that much, but I'll just put a few drops in that. And then I could either just dip my brush into the stain and then into the clear, and that will dilute it, or I could just dilute it, you know, with a few brushfuls right off the bat here, which I think is what I'll do. Okay, because I am not looking for a really dramatic darkening here. I'm just going to use this around the cervical necks of the teeth. So again, remember, you got to kind of work quick because this this stuff does begin to evaporate relatively quickly. So this is going to get just a quick swipe around the gingival area where you would expect to see a little bit darker area on the tooth because the enamel's thinner right there and the yellow colored dentin is shining through more through that translucent enamel. So again, just a real quick swipe. I'm not really getting up on the upper portions of the tooth at all. And with this, I don't have to worry about if some of it bleeds over onto the gingiva. It's just not going to show up, so it's really of no consequence. All right. So there we have a little bit of cervical staining on this. It's almost imperceptible, but I find that subtle is the name of the game on this. All right, I'm gonna take a quick picture. Okay, clean your brush thoroughly. Get all that stuff off by really agitating it inside the thinner, and I'll recap that. All right, now again, this is showing off dentistry. No patient has ever asked for stain in their fissures. And I love getting fancy with composites. You know, I learned a lot of that from Jason Smithson, and man, his stuff just looks absolutely lifelike. But I actually had a dentist one time do a filling on one of my composites because even though it was a filling and there was no stick, he just kind of looked at it and was like, well, that's got to be decay, right? Maybe I was a little heavy on it. So in any case, I would say most people don't need or want this, but just to show it, I'm using the brown. Again, I don't want it dramatic, so I'm going to dilute that down here with a bit of clear. Keep your paper towel handy for cleaning, excess off your brush. And I've got to be really, really sparing with this in my occlusal grooves. So just the tip of my brush. And I will usually just put a dot here in the pits, and then as it dries, I'll just pull that. All right. So notice these two teeth with the occlusal staining versus the adjacent teeth, which do not have it. All right. I will go ahead and do that on all of these posterior teeth.
The other reason I wouldn't bother a whole lot with this is, again, it's a surface stain, and if you're not going to coat this in something else, the first place you expect to have wear is on occlusal surfaces. And so as they chew and function in this, that's going to all get kind of rubbed off. So, up to you. It is fun. I enjoy putting it on there, so Sometimes that's the only reason I need to do it. I enjoy putting it on there, so sometimes that's the only reason I need to do it. Alright, occlusal staining done. We're done with that.
I can get rid of that stain. Now, what I do think adds some to the lifelikeness of this is to add in some decalcification and some incisal translucency. So your translucency is coming from blue. Again, this is monochromatic, it's monolithic. It's not going to transmit light through this. You're not going to pick up any light from the backside. So if you're trying to make it look natural, you have to create an optical illusion with that. So if you think about like a nice retracted smile photo with a contraster behind it, where you see that darker depth to it on the incisal is just from the translucent enamel with the stain, or I'm sorry, with the contractor kind of shining through there. We're going to kind of give that illusion by adding blue in strategic areas. So I'm stirring up my stain, reincorporating all of that. Okay, I'll shake it up. And now we're ready to apply some blue. Okay, clean my brush. So where I'm going to apply this is right along here. Okay, and I even kind of do like almost an arc. Again, that enamel is most prominent in between the developmental lobes of dentin. So you would usually see in this groove that I've created that it extends a little bit further down. All right, I'll try to put a blow up on a picture of where I would apply this. So we're going to go through and do this on the anterior teeth in particular. So I'll do one swipe right across the entire incisal area, like so. A little thick there. And this is mimicking the translucency of that enamel. Okay, and then secondarily I'll go back, and in those depressions I created, I'm going to put a little bit there. And because there's an actual depression, it kind of piles up there and it stays put better. Just the tip of the brush. All right, very subtle. You almost can't even tell it, and I'm looking at it. I'm sure you can't tell it, but if you were to put this side by side with one that has not been stained at the end of this process, it becomes very noticeable. Okay. Now I'll also do this on my posterior teeth, and in particular right on cusp tips. And again, if you want to show off and really make it pop, then come in and put a little dollop right on the top of each cusp. This will be the first thing to be lost during function, so you're doing it for your own sake, but why not? Okay. All right, there's all the blue I'm going to do. And then I usually finish off with the white. Okay, so I'm gonna clean my brush so I don't incorporate blue into my white stain. Dry my brush. And let's stir it up. So I'm scraping the bottom of the glass jar, getting all of that off the bottom. Now I'll shake it. And now it's ready to go on. So if I'm trying to match an existing tooth and there's white splotches, you know, little decalcification areas, then I will try to mimic that in this. If I'm just doing a random area, what I try to do is, again, if you think about how you've done this tooth, you've got depression, depression, that leaves 3 raised areas. I will typically, remember we just put blue in the groove, I'll try to do white, stripe, stripe, stripe on the raised areas, okay? And again, it's just creating some illusion of depth to this. And I don't remember if I mentioned this or not, but again, if you're making these, I would use the permanent crown and bridge resins, which means you got 4 options. You got Flexera from Desktop Health, you've got Bigo Varseo crown, you've got Onyx from Sprint Ray, and then this one is actually a material I've been playing with. I think they are the most recent one to get FDA approval for that. It's Crown Tech from Ceramco. And I like all 4 of those resins and use them routinely. I can't say I have like studies that tell you the performance of one versus another. I can just tell you that all I do is make pretty much full arch prosthetics, and all of them have worked really well in that capacity. All right, adding my stripes along those developmental lobes. There I was a little heavy with it, so I just dabbed that back. And again, if you get a little splotchy, that's okay, because if you look at natural teeth, they're splotchy as well. They've got, you know, little areas of character. That's what we're trying to mimic, so no worries. And again, I can't stress enough the importance of that first step of cutting in some anatomy, because that's the only way that you're going to actually get this to kind of accumulate in areas and make it look somewhat natural. So we're about done. And again, if this ends up being a 30-minute video, don't let that turn you off from this, because as I said, I am intentionally kind of doing it to a much greater degree than I normally would. All right, that's looking pretty darn good. Hopefully you'll be able to appreciate it even more in the still photos that I'm taking. All right, so the last step is your glaze over the top. Now, I mentioned this earlier. If I wanted this to really hang around for a long time, I would use this stuff, and I would put it on thin and kind of spread it around with a brush. This is the translucent pink from Annex Gum, or Annex Dent. I'm not doing that here, so I'm going to just use glaze. And so, again, I can use Stellar Glaze or Nano Varnish. Either of them seems to be giving me the same results. I don't have a lot left in my bottle here of Nano Varnish, so I'm just going to use that and try to finish this bottle off. You see how much I've put in there? That's about how much. This goes on pretty thick, so it's going to take a decent amount. Now this does have to be light cured. Okay, so I do have to worry about where I hold this and all that kind of thing. So I'll generally do, let's say, the anterior region, okay, and be holding it in the posterior, and then I'll light cure that, and then I'll come back and maybe do the remainder. So here I'm going to hold it from this side, so maybe I'll do what I can buccal and lingual on these areas. I'm going to start from K9, and I'm just glopping this thing on. This is not super exact, but man, it really does make it pop and gives it that nice smooth surface. And I try to use the full brushfuls on my buccal and lingual surface, and then just with whatever residual is left on the brush, I'll come back and do occlusal surfaces, because I don't want to blunt all that and actually change my occlusion with this thing. So I'm gonna go put this in the oven. All right, there's coat one. Now I'm gonna just hold it from the side I've already done. And I don't usually run the full cycle with this because I'm just trying to set it. But let's compare looking at this from the occlusal with the side that's been glazed versus this side. You know, noticeable shininess difference, and to the feel, it certainly feels smoother when I do that. So now we go to the next area. So big brush full, hit the buccal, overlap a little bit onto the area you've already done, and it looks like I dispensed about the perfect amount, because that's basically the last of it. And you can do multiple coats of this if you'd like. Again, I'm just thinking, how long does it need to last? And most of the stuff I'm doing, it just has to last 3 or 4 months while the implants are integrating. Use clean brushes, because you can see I was brushing on a little glop of pigment there. So that's basically it. I'm going to end the video here, but you can see the final result of this. This is really nice looking, lifelike, pretty minimal amount of effort. So highly recommend this stuff if you're doing printed or PMMA restorations. Can make the aesthetics a whole lot better. All right, thanks.